3 hours ago, my daughter-in-law purposefully destroyed the dress I intended to wear tonight, thinking she had finally scrubbed me from her picture-perfect existence. She has no idea the deed to this mansion is sitting right here in my purse. As I step onto the driveway, she thinks she is the queen of the castle, but she is about to learn that the woman she despises is actually the one who owns the roof over her head. My name is Evelyn Harper. At 62 years old, with my silver hair cropped into a sensible pixie cut that my daughter-in-law calls severe. I stepped out of the black rental SUV and onto the paved driveway of the estate. The gravel crunched loudly beneath my heels, a stark contrast to the thumping bass of the American pop music vibrating the double-paned windows. From the outside, the mansion in the exclusive Dallas suburbs looked like a fortress of light and wealth, golden chandeliers shimmering behind the glass. I pulled my beige trench coat tighter around my waist, though the Texas evening was humid. My lips were pressed into a thin line, and my hands gripped the handles of my old leather purse until my knuckles turned white. To the guests inside, I was just the mother-in-law, a background character in a vintage outfit that they assumed smelled of mothballs. They saw a harmless widow. They did not see the shark who used to eat audit reports for breakfast. They certainly did not know that inside my bag, nestled between a pack of tissues and my reading glasses, sat a property deed and a USB drive containing enough evidence to ruin the party hostess forever. To the casual observer, and certainly to my son's wife, I am just a standard American widow. I live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, drive a sedan that has seen better days, and spend my time gardening. They have conveniently forgotten, or perhaps simply chose to ignore, that before I retired early following my husband's sudden death, I was the chief financial officer for Northbridge Insight Group. I spent 40 years staring down audit committees and managing mergers worth millions of dollars. I know how to spot a liability. And unfortunately, the biggest liability in my life currently wears a wedding ring I paid for. My son, Lucas, is 35 years old and works in luxury real estate sales. He is handsome, charming, and utterly malleable. He married Vanessa 3 years ago. Vanessa is a girl from a perfectly average middle-class background who developed a severe allergy to anything that isn't brand name the moment she got a taste of commission checks. She treats life like a stage, and her Instagram feed is the script. The stage she performs on is this very house, the mansion they live in with its 6 bedrooms, infinity pool, and marble foyer is technically owned by a corporate entity known as Maple Crest Holdings, LLC. Lucas tells his friends, and Vanessa tells her thousands of followers, that his wealthy boss lets them live there on a special executive lease as a perk of his job. It fits their narrative perfectly. They get the lifestyle without the mortgage, and they get to brag about how valued Lucas is at his firm. Here is the secret I have kept locked away for 3 years. There is no wealthy boss. Maple Crest Holdings is a shell company I established using my husband's life insurance payout and my own aggressive stock portfolio. I bought this house. I own every brick, every light fixture, and every square inch of the limestone floors Vanessa is currently walking on. I kept my name off the paperwork and hid behind the LLC because I wanted Lucas to build his own character. I wanted him to stand on his own 2 feet without knowing his mother was the safety net catching him every time he stumbled. Instead, my silence created a monster. For 3 years, I have watched Vanessa treat me with a glossy, poisonous politeness. She looks at me with veiled contempt, seeing only a lonely old woman who she thinks is desperate to cling to their shiny new success. She thinks I am a relic, a dependent, someone who needs to be managed and kept at arm's length so I do not tarnish her aesthetic. As I walked toward the heavy oak doors, I could hear the laughter inside. I paused, adjusting the strap of my bag. A question lingered in the humid air, one I knew the audience would ask. If I was the real owner, why did I let her disrespect me for so long? Why did I endure the snide comments about my thrifty clothes and the way she rolled her eyes when I spoke? I suppose I held on to hope that she would eventually show some grace. I stayed silent for the sake of my son's happiness. But why is it that only when she destroyed my dress did I decide to burn her fantasies to the ground in a single night? Because the dress was not just fabric. It was the final proof that she didn't just want me out of the house. She wanted to erase me completely. And I do not erase easily. The resentment did not start with the ruined dress. It started the very first time I walked up the steps of the mansion 3 years ago. Vanessa opened the massive oak door, her smile tight and practiced, like a pageant contestant who had been holding a pose for too long. I saw her eyes flick down immediately to my sensible flats, which I had bought on sale for $40, and then to my leather handbag, which had a small scuff on the corner. "Oh, Evelyn," she had chirped, leaning in for a hug that barely touched my shoulders. "You made it. And look at that outfit. It is so vintage. Very brave." She led me into the kitchen, a cavernous space filled with white marble and brushed steel. She made a show of running her hand along the countertop of the island, which was larger than my entire dining room. "Lucas just loves the open concept," she said, pouring me a glass of iced tea without asking if I wanted one. "He thrives in this kind of elegance. It is just such a change from that cramped little place you raised him in. Right, I bet he feels like he can finally breathe." I forced a smile and took the tea. "It is a beautiful kitchen. Vanessa." I went home that night and opened Instagram. There was a photo of them standing on the balcony I had paid for, holding champagne flutes I had effectively purchased. The caption read, "So grateful for the life we have built from nothing. Just us against the world. Self-made hustle." I stared at the screen. Built from nothing. It was as if the $200,000 down payment I had wired through the shell company never existed. I was the silent partner in their success. But to Vanessa, I was just a lingering artifact from Lucas's less glamorous past. It got worse. A few months later, during a small gathering, I was sitting in the living room while Vanessa chatted with 2 of her friends in the foyer. They did not realize I could hear them. "Lucas is always worried she will try to move in eventually," Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "He feels guilty, I guess." But I told him, "Honey, I love your mother, but this place is huge and it is still not big enough for another adult." She paused before saying, "Another adult." And the way she said it made my stomach turn. She did not mean a person. She meant a burden. I started to feel like a prop. I was only invited over for Mother's Day brunch or holidays where a family photo was required to maintain their wholesome image online. We would take the picture. She would tag me, and then 20 minutes later, she would be checking her watch. "Mum, you are reading into it too much," Lucas said when I tried to bring it up gently one afternoon. He was looking at his phone, typing a text message. "Vanessa is just stressed. She wants everything to be perfect. You know how the market is right now. Speaking of which, I have to run. Lucas, about the lease agreement." I started, trying to pivot to business. Mom, please. He cut me off, grabbing his keys. I handle the business. You do not need to worry your head about the company stuff. Just enjoy your retirement. I drove back to my rental apartment in a quiet, working-class neighborhood. I sat in my small living room, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, and scrolled through pictures of my son living in a palace. I felt like a ghost haunting my own investment. The insults became smaller but more frequent, like paper cuts. Maybe do not bring up politics at dinner tonight. Evelyn, she told me once, our guests are very progressive, and we do not want any old-fashioned friction. Another time, she looked out the window at my 10-year-old sedan parked in their circular driveway. You know, Lucas could probably help you lease something newer. That car looks very poor. It clashes with the aesthetic of the front yard. Then came the invitation for tonight. Vanessa called me a week ago. Her voice was sweeter than usual, which immediately put me on guard. We are hosting the annual networking gala this Saturday, she said. It is going to be the biggest event of the year. Investors, developers, everyone who matters will be there. I would love to come. I said, Great, she replied. But Evelyn, please make sure you dress appropriately. Really put some effort in this time. There will be very important people there, and we need to make sure every single detail reflects the brand. We cannot have anything looking out of place. I could hear the calculation in her tone. She wanted me there as a prop, but a polished prop. She had no idea that the important people she was so worried about impressing were ultimately answerable to me. For the first time in 5 years, I decided to treat myself to something that did not come from a clearance rack. I drove to a small, independent boutique in the Arts District, a place that smelled of lavender and money, and I found it. It was a midnight blue evening gown, cut from heavy silk that draped elegantly without clinging, with long sleeves and a modest but striking neckline. It cost $600. I paid for it with money I had saved from my personal dividends, not the allowance my son thought I lived on. When I stood in the dressing room mirror, I did not see a 62-year-old widow who spent her days gardening. I saw Evelyn Harper, the woman who had steered a company through 3 recessions. I saw someone worthy of respect. For a fleeting moment, I felt like myself again. The day before the party, I made the mistake of bringing the dress to the mansion. I wanted to hang it in the guest suite, so I would not have to worry about wrinkling it during the drive over on the night of the gala. Vanessa was in the foyer when I arrived, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, her eyes scanning the garment bag before I even unzipped it. When I revealed the dress, her expression was a masterclass in passive aggression. She tilted her head, a tight smile playing on her lips. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It is cute. Very vintage. It really suits your generation." She reached out and fingered the fabric. You know, silk wrinkles so easily. "Why do you not leave it here? I will have Rosa steam it for you. She is a wizard with the steamer, and that way you do not have to stress about it." Her offer sounded so helpful, so daughterly, that I pushed down the little alarm bell ringing in the back of my mind. "Thank you, Vanessa," I said. "That would be lovely." I arrived at the mansion at noon on the day of the party, hours before the guests were due, intending to dress early and perhaps help with the final arrangements. I walked up the grand staircase to the guest room, humming a low tune, feeling a rare sense of anticipation. I opened the closet door and froze. The midnight blue silk was no longer blue. Large, jagged splotches of angry white marred the front of the skirt and the chest. It looked like a disease had eaten through the fabric. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched one of the white stains. It was stiff and rough, the fibers chemically burned and dissolving under my touch. My fingertip came away damp and smelling of a swimming pool. It was bleach. High concentration, industrial bleach. Oh my God. I spun around. Vanessa was standing in the doorway, her hands flying to her mouth in a performance of shock that deserved an Academy Award. Mom. Oh. No. She cried, rushing over but stopping just short of touching the ruined dress. I told Rosa to be careful. I told her to use the gentle steamer setting. She must have. I do not know what she did. Maybe she sprayed it with cleaner instead of water. That woman is getting so clumsy. I am going to have to dock her pay for this. I am so sorry. She looked at me, her eyes wide and wet with fake tears. You cannot wear this. But do not worry. I have plenty of old dresses in the back of my closet. They might be a little tight, and maybe a bit too modern for you. But we will find something that covers you up. She patted my arm, a gesture that felt more like a shove, and bustled out of the room, promising to fetch a replacement. I stood there, the smell of chlorine stinging my nose. I walked into the adjoining bathroom to wash the chemical residue off my finger. That was when I saw it. Tucked behind the decorative wicker hamper was a bottle of heavy-duty bleach, the cap still unscrewed. Next to it lay a small microfiber cloth, damp and stained, with the exact midnight blue dye of my dress. A housekeeper like Rosa, who had been with the previous owners for 10 years before I kept her on, would never make a mistake like that. She would never bring bleach into a bedroom to steam a silk dress. This was not negligence, it was an execution. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The reflection showed a woman with grey hair and a shocked, pale face. Downstairs, I could hear Vanessa's voice, bright and laughing as she gave orders to the caterers. She was happy. She thought she had stripped me of my dignity, forcing me to either leave in shame or appear in her cast-offs like a charity case. Slowly, the shock in my eyes faded. The hurt that had pricked at my heart hardened into something cold and heavy, like a stone settling in my stomach. I dried my hands on a towel. I was done being the victim. I was done being the mother-in-law. Tonight, I was the landlord. I told Vanessa I had a sudden, blinding migraine. It was the only excuse she would accept without rolling her eyes, mostly because she did not want a sick old woman vomiting on her expensive limestone floors. I walked out of the mansion with the garment bag slung over my shoulder, the chemical stench of bleach wafting up from it like a toxic perfume. As I drove my beat-up sedan away from the estate, I realized the message was not just about fashion. That ruined dress was a declaration. It said, "You do not belong in this world, and I'm going to make sure you never feel comfortable here again." When I got back to my apartment, I did not cry. I went straight to my home office, a small corner of the living room that looked nothing like the sprawling study Lucas had at the mansion. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet and pulled out a thick, fireproof box labelled Maplecrest Holdings. This was the shell company I had built from the ground up, the legal entity that owned the mansion, a boutique hotel downtown, and several commercial strip malls. To the world, Maplecrest was a faceless conglomerate. To me, it was my life's work. My hands were steady now. I started sifting through the physical mail I had collected over the past few months. my mind racing back to a specific incident 3 weeks ago. I had been at the mansion, picking up some mail that had been forwarded there by mistake. I remembered seeing a thick envelope from the bank, but before I could open it, Lucas had practically snatched it out of my hand. "Mom, do not worry about that," he had said, laughing. "It is just junk mail. You know how these banks are, always sending offers for credit cards you do not need. I will shred it for you." I had let it go then, thinking he was just being helpful. Now, sitting in the silence of my apartment, I knew better. I opened my laptop and logged into the Maplecrest corporate banking portal. My fingers flew across the keys. I navigated to the security log. There it was. An access attempt from an unrecognized IP address exactly 2 weeks ago, followed by a request to reset the administrative password. The location of the IP address was not some hacker in a foreign country. It was a residential node right here in Dallas, right in the neighborhood where my son lived. I kept digging. I opened the dedicated email account for the company, one I checked rarely since the assets were mostly self-sustaining. Buried in the spam folder was an email from a law firm I did not recognize. The subject line read, "Follow-up transfer of management authority." I clicked it open. The text was polite but terrifying. "Dear Representative, per our phone conversation regarding the restructuring of Maplecrest Holdings for the new beneficiary, we require the current owner's signature or a court order of incapacity to proceed." I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. Vanessa did not just want to push me out socially. She thought the owner of the house was some distant, wealthy boss of Lucas's. She was trying to maneuver Lucas into a position where the boss would sign over control, likely by convincing this imaginary owner that it was for tax purposes. But the second part of that sentence chilled me to the bone, or a court order of incapacity. I grabbed my phone and dialed Andrew Cole, my longtime attorney, and the only other person who knew the truth about Maplecrest. It was Saturday, so his office was closed, but his paralegal picked up the emergency line. "This is Evelyn Harper," I said, my voice crisp. "I need to speak to Andrew immediately." "Oh, Mrs. Harper," the young woman stammered. I thought, well, we had a call yesterday from a woman saying she was the new family representative. She was asking about the protocols for generational asset transfer if the primary trustee becomes mentally unfit. The final piece of the puzzle snapped into place. It was not just greed, it was a trap. I thought about the last few months. Every time I forgot a name or misplaced my keys in front of Vanessa, she would make a production out of it. You know, "Mom," she would say, tilting her head with fake concern. "The courts in Texas are very strict about this stuff. If you keep forgetting things, well, people talk. You do not want the state to step in." I looked at the garment bag on the floor. Destroying the dress was not just petty cruelty, it was a stress test. She wanted me to have a meltdown at the party tonight. She wanted me to scream, to cry, to look irrational and unstable in front of the city's elite. She would have recorded it. And that video would have been Exhibit A in a hearing to prove I was losing my mind. She was planning to file for guardianship, force me into a facility, and take control of everything I owned. I stared at my reflection in the dark window of my apartment. The hurt was gone. In its place was the cold, hard calculation of a CFO who had just discovered embezzlement. "She thinks I am losing my mind," I whispered to the empty room. "She's about to find out exactly how sharp I still am." I decided that reacting with anger was a luxury I could not afford. Anger makes you sloppy, and I needed to be surgical. instead of confronting Vanessa. I drove to a discount electronics store and bought a cheap prepaid smartphone for $40. I activated it with a new number and called the private wealth division of the bank Vanessa loved to brag about. I identified myself not as Evelyn Harper, but as the new executive assistant for Maplecrest Holdings, requesting a clarification meeting regarding the property assets. When I arrived at the bank, I wore a severe black suit and kept my glasses perched on the end of my nose. The relationship manager, a young man eager to please a high-net-worth client, did not suspect a thing. "We are so glad to finally coordinate with the corporate side," he said, opening a file on his desk. "Mrs. Vanessa Harper has been very aggressive, proactive about the restructuring. She mentioned that the current director is looking to optimize the tax liabilities for her son's primary residence." I nodded, keeping my face blank. "We just want to ensure the paperwork aligns with the new living trust draft." He turned his monitor slightly so I could see. "Exactly. As you can see here, the proposal moves the deed from Maplecrest directly into the Harper Family Trust. The primary beneficiary is listed as Lucas Harper, with full power of attorney granted to his spouse if he is unavailable. And of course, the liquid assets of Maplecrest are set to be merged into the fund managed by her advisor, Mr. Carter. My name was nowhere on the document. I had been erased. I left the bank with a recording of the entire conversation on the burner phone in my pocket. My next stop was the home of my oldest friend, Lorraine. Lorraine is a retired school principal, but her daughter, Maya, is a paralegal with a mind like a steel trap. We sat in Lorraine's kitchen, drinking strong coffee, while Maya tapped away on her laptop, searching public court records. "Here it is," Maya said, her voice dropping. "It is not a filing yet, just a consultation record from 3 weeks ago. Vanessa met with a lawyer named Richard Sneed. Evelyn, this guy is a shark. He specializes in involuntary guardianship for the elderly." I leaned in, reading the notes Maya had pulled up. Client expressed concern about mother-in-law's cognitive decline, need advice on guardianship and controlling primary residence due to safety risks. My blood ran cold. I thought back to the family barbecues over the last 6 months. Vanessa would always insist I try her special cocktails, which I later realized were loaded with triple shots of tequila. When I would stumble or slur my words, she would whip out her phone. "Oh, look at Mom," she would shout, laughing. "She's so wild tonight." She was not just embarrassing me. She was building a digital archive of evidence to prove I was an alcoholic or mentally unstable. I waited until the following weekend, when Lucas and Vanessa flew to Miami for a much-needed break. I told them I would come by to water the plants, the moment their Uber left for the airport. I entered the mansion. I did not just water the ferns. I installed 4 miniature cameras. One looked like a standard black power adapter, which I plugged into the kitchen island. Another was hidden in the frame of a generic abstract painting in the living room. Before I left, I planted the bait. I placed a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter. It bore the Maplecrest logo, which I had printed at home, and was marked Urgent Financial Discrepancy Notification. 2 days later, I sat in my darkened living room, watching the live feed on my tablet. Vanessa walked into the kitchen, her tan fresh from Florida, still wearing her sunglasses. She saw the letter. She did not call Lucas. She did not leave it for me. She ripped it open. I watched her eyes scan the fake document. Her face went pale. She immediately grabbed her phone and dialed. The audio from the kitchen camera was crystal clear. "Carter, Pick up, she hissed into the phone. It is me. Listen. We have a problem. There is a letter here from the holding company. They are auditing the accounts. No. I do not know how much they know. You told me the old lady was too senile to check the books. She paced around the kitchen island, her voice rising in panic. I know. I know. She snapped. But the guardianship papers are not signed yet. We need to speed this up. If we can get her declared incompetent by next week. This audit won't matter because I will be the one answering it. Yes. I will get the doctor to sign the affidavit. Just make sure the money is moved before anyone realizes she is actually the one in charge. I stopped the recording. I had what I needed. She wasn't just a mean girl. She was a criminal. And she had just confessed to the empty room, unaware that the senile old lady was watching every move in high definition. I sat across from Andrew Cole in his mahogany-panelled office, the air conditioner humming a low, steady rhythm against the Texas heat. I placed the cheap burner phone and the USB drive on his desk with the precision of a poker player laying down a royal flush. We listened to the recording of the bank manager, and then we watched the footage of Vanessa pacing in my kitchen, conspiring with her so-called advisor. Andrew took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He remained silent for a long moment. Evelyn, he finally said, his voice grave. This goes beyond a bad marriage. This is conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. If they file for guardianship, they could freeze your access to your own accounts while the court investigates. We need to move fast. I want to burn it down. Andrew, I said, my voice steady, but I want to do it legally. Andrew nodded and pulled a legal pad toward him. First, we are moving every single asset held by Maple Crest Holdings into an irrevocable trust effective immediately. I will name myself as the trustee for now, which means neither Lucas nor Vanessa can touch a dime, even if they get guardianship over you. Second, we are preparing a criminal file. He paused, looking me dead in the eye. I want you to go dark, change your email passwords, get a new laptop, and do not log into anything from your old devices. If Lucas has your passwords, assume he has given them to her. That afternoon, Andrew introduced me to Mark Delaney, a private investigator and former police detective who looked like he had seen everything the world had to offer and found it unimpressive. Mark had been digging into Carter, the man Vanessa was speaking to on the phone. The guy is a predator, Mark said, tossing a manila folder onto the table. His real name is Carter Vance. He runs a firm that targets retirees with high-risk investment schemes. The SEC has been looking at him for 2 years. But here is the kicker about your daughter-in-law. He flipped the file open to a page covered in red ink. Vanessa is drowning. Evelyn. She owes over $80,000 in credit card debt. Most of it is cosmetic surgery clinics and luxury boutiques. She has maxed out 3 cards. Carter likely promised to wipe her debt if she brings your portfolio to his firm so he can churn it for fees. It all made sense. She was not just cruel, she was desperate. I left the office and made a call to the Texas Adult Protective Services from my burner phone. I needed to know the rules of engagement. The caseworker was sympathetic, but blunt. Unless there is physical harm. These financial cases are hard to prove without a smoking gun, she told me. If you can get a recorded confession where they explicitly state their intent to defraud you or use guardianship as a tool for theft, that changes everything. A plan began to form in my mind. A recorded confession. I did not just need to survive. I needed them to think they had won, so they would get careless. The party was coming up, It was the perfect stage. Vanessa wanted a show, I would give her one. I called a high-end designer in downtown Dallas, a woman who dressed oil tycoons' wives and did not advertise to the public. I ordered a custom gown, a deep crimson red that commanded attention. Do not send it to the house, I instructed her. Deliver it to this address. I gave her Lorraine's address. I would not give Vanessa a second chance to play with bleach. The final piece of the trap fell into place when Andrew contacted a friend of his at the FBI, Special Agent Miller, who worked in the Financial Crimes Division. When she saw the file on Carter Vance and heard the audio of him conspiring to liquidate my assets, she was interested. If Carter shows up at this party, Agent Miller said over the speakerphone, and if we can catch them engaging in a wire fraud attempt or discussing the laundering of the assets, we can move. We have been trying to nail Vance for months. He will be there, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Vanessa thinks this party is her coronation. She will want her court wizard there to celebrate. I hung up the phone. The stage was set. I was going to walk into that mansion not as a victim, but as the bait in a trap worth millions. They wanted to steal my life. Let them try to take it while the FBI listened in. The mansion had been transformed into a glittering shrine to vanity. The theme was old Hollywood glamour, which meant rented velvet ropes, excessive gold lighting, and a small army of waiters moving through the crowd with trays of champagne. I watched from the periphery as Vanessa floated through the room in a shimmering silver gown, holding her phone up to capture every toast and every fake laugh for her story. She looked like the perfect hostess, the queen of a kingdom she believed she had conquered. I arrived at 6:30 in a simple beige cocktail dress that made me look exactly like the invisible, harmless mother-in-law she wanted me to be. However, over my arm, I carried a black garment bag. Vanessa intercepted me near the staircase. Her eyes locked onto the bag, and her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She thought she had broken my spirit with the bleach incident earlier in the week. Seeing me bring another dress clearly disrupted her narrative. "Mom," she said, her voice pitched high to be heard over the jazz band. "I did not think you would. Bring a change of clothes. I wanted to look my best for your big night," I said, clutching the bag tightly. "I will just go upstairs and change before the main speeches start." I walked up to the guest room and hung the bag in the closet. Inside was a cheap polyester dress I had bought at a discount store for $20. I left the closet door slightly ajar, checked the angle of the hidden camera I had installed in the photo frame on the dresser, and went back downstairs to grab a glass of water. 10 minutes later, I checked the live feed on my burner phone in the privacy of the powder room. The footage was grainy, but undeniable. Vanessa slipped into the guest room, checking the hallway behind her. She opened the garment bag. From her clutch, she pulled out a small travel-sized bottle. I watched as she unscrewed the cap and poured the liquid onto the chest of the decoy dress. She stepped back, admiring her handiwork, and then she laughed. It was a cold, solitary sound. "Let us see you wear this one," she muttered to the empty room. "This time, you will not dare come down." I waited another 5 minutes before going back upstairs. I screamed. It was a loud, shattered sound that stopped the conversation in the hallway. "My dress," I wailed, stumbling out of the room with the ruined polyester bunching in my hands. "It is ruined. Again." Guests turned to look. Vanessa rushed up the stairs, her face a mask of concern. She put her arm around me, but her grip was firm, almost painful. Oh, Mom, she said, loud enough for the people below to hear. Did you have another accident? I told you that you have been so clumsy lately. It is okay. You are just confused. I played my part perfectly. I let my shoulders slump, shaking my head, tears streaming down my face. I am so embarrassed. I cannot stay here. I look a mess. Maybe that is best. Vanessa soothed, signaling Lucas with her eyes. Lucas, get your mom a car. She is having one of her episodes. Lucas looked mortified, apologizing to the guests near him in a hushed whisper. He walked me to the front door, clearly relieved to be getting the problem out of sight. As the ride-share car pulled away, I saw Vanessa shrug at a group of women, tapping her temple significantly. She thought she had won. She thought the old nuisance was gone for the night. I did not go home. I directed the driver to Lorraine's house 3 streets away. Lorraine was waiting with the real dress. I stripped off the beige act and stepped into the crimson-red gown. It was structured, regal, and fit me like armor. I brushed my hair back, applied a coat of dark lipstick, and looked in the mirror. The crying old woman was gone. The CEO had returned. Back at the mansion, the second phase of the trap was springing. Andrew Cole, Mark Delaney, and 2 undercover FBI agents entered the party. They were dressed in impeccable tuxedos. Vanessa, assuming they were the high-rolling investors Carter had promised to send, practically ran to greet them. "Welcome, gentlemen," she beamed. "I am so glad you could make it to our home. We hear there is a significant asset deal happening soon," Andrew said, playing the part of the eager capitalist. "Oh, absolutely," Vanessa replied, leading them toward the bar. "My husband and I are just finalizing the transfer. The house is practically ours already. We have big plans for the equity." While she was digging her own grave with every boastful word, a black SUV rolled silently up to the front gate. The driver killed the headlights. I sat in the back seat for a moment, taking a deep breath. Through the tinted window, I could see the glow of the party. I could see my daughter-in-law raising a glass, celebrating the theft of my life. I opened the door and stepped out onto the pavement. The night was warm, but I felt nothing but ice in my veins. It was time to go inside and introduce the real owner of the house. The double doors of the main entrance swung open with a heavy thud, cutting through the ambient chatter and the jazz saxophone. I stepped into the foyer. I was no longer the frazzled, weeping old woman in a polyester rag. I was Evelyn Harper, clad in crimson silk that cost more than Vanessa's first car, standing tall with my shoulders back and my head held high. The silence that swept across the room was immediate. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me, and for the first time all night, I did not shrink away. I walked into the center of the room with the steady, predatory grace of a lioness returning to her territory. Vanessa froze mid-toast. Her champagne flute remained raised, but her knuckles were white against the glass. She blinked rapidly, her eyes darting down to my dress, trying to process where I had found it and why I looked so composed. She recovered quickly, forcing a stretched, panicked smile onto her face as she rushed toward me. "Mom, you came back. We were so worried about you. I thought you were—" She trailed off, her voice tight. "I thought you were going home to rest. You know the doctor said you get confused when you are tired." I sidestepped her outstretched hand and walked straight to the bandstand. I took the microphone from the stunned lead singer. "I apologize for the interruption," I said. My voice amplified and crystal clear, echoing off the high ceilings. but I wanted to say a few words of gratitude to everyone for coming to my house tonight. A ripple of polite laughter moved through the crowd. They thought it was a joke, a sweet old lady claiming the mansion. But Vanessa went pale, and beside her, Lucas looked like he was about to be sick. "Oh, Mom." Vanessa laughed nervously, reaching for the mic. "She is having an episode. Let us just—" "I am not finished," I said, my voice dropping an octave, sharp enough to cut glass. I gestured toward the back of the room. "I would like to introduce my guests. Andrew Cole, my attorney, Mark Delaney, private investigator, and Agents Miller and Ross from the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The laughter died instantly. The four of them stepped forward from the shadows, their expressions grim. 10 years ago, I continued, addressing the room after my husband died. I used his life insurance and my own investment portfolio to form a company called Maple Crest Holdings. I bought this land. I built this house. And I let my son and his wife live here rent-free because I wanted them to have a good start. I nodded to Andrew. He tapped a tablet, and the massive 80-inch television screen above the fireplace flickered to life. A high-resolution scan of the property deed appeared. My name, Evelyn Harper, was listed clearly as the sole owner and managing member of Maple Crest Holdings. "That is a lie," Vanessa shrieked, her poise shattering. "That is forged." And this I asked. The screen changed. The video footage from the hidden camera in the guest room began to play. It showed Vanessa, clear as day, pulling the bleach bottle from her clutch. The room watched in horrified silence as she destroyed the decoy dress. Then, her voice rang out from the speakers, distorted but unmistakable. "Let us see you wear this one. This time. You will not dare come down." Gasps erupted from the guests. Phones were raised, live streams capturing every second of her humiliation. "It is a deep fake," Vanessa screamed, looking around wildly. "She is crazy. She used AI to make that. She is trying to frame me because she is jealous. We have the metadata. Mrs. Harper," Andrew said calmly from the floor. "But if you think that is fake, perhaps you can explain this call to your financial advisor, Mr. Vance." The screen went black, but the audio played. It was the recording from my kitchen. "The guardianship papers are not signed yet. If we can get her declared incompetent by next week. Just make sure the money is moved. We sell the house, put her in a state facility, somewhere cheap." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a reputation dying. Agents Miller and Ross stepped forward, pulling their badges from their jackets. "Vanessa Harper," Agent Miller said, her voice cutting through the tension. "We are investigating Carter Vance for a federal wire fraud and elder abuse scheme. Based on the evidence provided tonight, you are being detained for conspiracy to commit fraud." Vanessa stumbled back, knocking into a waiter. A tray of glasses crashed to the floor, shattering like her life. "No, I did it for us, Lucas." Tell them Lucas did not move toward her. He collapsed onto the white velvet sofa, burying his face in his hands. He looked like a child who had just realized the monsters were real. "I did not know," he whispered, his voice trembling so hard it was barely audible. I thought it was just tax restructuring. I did not know about the facility. I did not know she was going to sell the house." I walked over to him. I stood over my son, looking down at the man who had watched his wife belittle me for 3 years and done nothing. "Lucas?" I said. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I swear." "You lived in this house for 3 years," I said quietly. "You saw the bills? You saw the lifestyle. Did you ever, even once, ask me who actually owned the roof over your head?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He had never asked because he preferred the lie. He preferred the version of the world where I was nothing and he was king. And now, the castle walls had fallen. Vanessa panicked. The reality of the situation crashed down on her like a tidal wave, and she lunged toward Lucas, her hands clawing at the lapels of his expensive suit. "Lucas, shut up!" she screamed, shaking him violently. "Do not say another word to them. Do not look at her." She turned to the agents, then back to Lucas, her eyes wide and manic. "I did everything for our future. You idiot! You owe me. You have to stand by me. We are a team." With those words, she tightened the noose around her own neck. She had just admitted that the conspiracy was not a misunderstanding, but a calculated effort to secure a future funded by my stolen assets. Agent Miller moved in, her handcuffs rattling ominously. "Vanessa Harper, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and attempted elder abuse." "No!" Vanessa shrieked. She grabbed a half-empty champagne flute from a passing waiter's tray and hurled it at the wall. The glass shattered, spraying shards and expensive wine onto the pristine carpet. "This is a setup. All of this is just a sick plan by that old witch to humiliate me. She is the crazy one." The room gasped, but then a voice cut through the hysteria. It was Dr. Aris, a renowned psychologist whom Vanessa had invited specifically to show off her social connections. He stepped forward from the crowd, adjusting his glasses, looking at Vanessa with undisguised disgust. "Guardianship is a protective measure for the vulnerable, Mrs. Harper," he said, his voice carrying clearly over the murmurs. "It is not a financial instrument to clear the path for your real estate portfolio. You have just made yourself a textbook example of predation." Vanessa froze, realizing that the very people she tried to impress were now the jury condemning her. Lucas let out a sob that sounded like something breaking. He looked at me, his face wet with tears and snot, stripping away the handsome, successful facade he had worn for years. "Mom, can I please?" he stammered, his voice thick. "I need to tell you. Carter. He made me sign papers. He told me they were just to ensure you got into a care facility if your memory got worse. He promised it would be a luxury suite. I swear. Mom. I did not know about the cheap state home. I did not know they were going to sell the house immediately. But you signed them," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "I was blind." He choked out. I wanted to keep Vanessa happy. I was so afraid that if I could not give her this life, she would leave. I blinded myself because I was a coward. I looked at my son. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him it was going to be okay, but that would have been a lie, and I was done with lies. You had 1,000 chances to ask me. "Lucas," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "but you chose silence. You were afraid of losing the house, afraid of losing your wife. Today, the thing you feared most happened anyway, but it is because you opened the door for it." Agent Miller stepped between us. "Mr. Harper, if you truly did not know the full extent of the scheme to defraud the state and your mother, you have a very narrow window to help yourself. We need a witness. You can testify against Carter and your wife, or you can go down as a co-conspirator." Lucas looked at Vanessa, who was now being wrestled toward the door by Agent Ross, spitting curses at everyone in sight. Then he looked at me. "There is your choice," I said, gesturing to the door. "You can walk out those doors with her, hire a lawyer, and fight this. Or you can sit down with Andrew and these agents, tell the truth, and accept a life that is less shiny, but clean." The room held its breath. Lucas looked at the woman he married, then at the floor, slowly, painfully. He dropped to his knees, right there on the rug. "I lived in your house thinking it was mine," he whispered, staring at my shoes. "I treated you like a guest in your own home. Now I am asking you to let me live here as a real tenant. If there is even a chance, I will sleep in the guest room. I will pay rent. I just want to make it right." The sight of a grown man kneeling before his mother in a room full of socialites was uncomfortable. It was raw. But for the first time in years, I saw my son, not Vanessa's husband. I did not reach down to help him up. I simply nodded. "Tonight. This house is a crime scene," I said firmly. "Andrew will handle the statement. Tomorrow. If you really want to fix this, we will talk. But we will talk with a lease agreement written for a stranger. No mother and son clauses. You earn your place here, or you leave." The sight of Vanessa being led away in handcuffs was something that would live on the internet forever. As Agent Ross guided her firmly through the foyer, she was still twisting her body, screaming profanities that echoed off the high ceilings. "You planned this," she shrieked, her face twisted and ugly with rage. "It is all her fault. She is jealous of me. She ruined my life." The guests, the very people she had preened for just an hour ago, held up their phones like a firing squad. They recorded every second of her downfall. The perfect image of the doting daughter-in-law and the wealthy hostess evaporated in real time, replaced by a desperate woman facing federal charges. Just as they reached the door, Vanessa's clutch, which Agent Miller was holding as evidence, began to vibrate. Agent Miller pulled out the phone. The screen flashed Carter, advisor. She held a finger to her lips, silencing the room, and answered it, mimicking Vanessa's breathless tone perfectly. "Carter." "Yes." Miller said into the phone. "No. It is loud here. Tomorrow, yes. Come to the house at 10. We will sign everything then." She hung up and looked at me. "We will have a reception committee waiting for him tomorrow morning." I felt a chill go through me. My family tragedy was just a line item on a criminal's spreadsheet. To Carter Vance, I was not a person. I was just a portfolio to be liquidated. As the police cars faded into the night, the guests began to file out. The mood had shifted from festive to morbidly fascinated. Some of Lucas's business associates walked past him without a word, already distancing themselves from the scandal. A few people stopped by me. That was incredible. "Mrs. Harper," a young woman in a sequined dress said, shaking my hand vigorously. "You are officially the coolest grandma in Dallas." I gave her a thin, tired smile. "Drive safely." I did not feel cool. I felt exhausted. Victory, it turned out, tasted a lot like ash. When the last guest had gone, Andrew placed a thick folder on the kitchen island, right next to a puddle of spilled champagne. "This is the transfer agreement," Andrew said. "It moves the house and all liquid assets into the irrevocable trust effective tonight. From this moment on, no one makes a move regarding this property without going through me." "Shh. And you?" I looked around the room. It was a wreck. Broken glass, stained carpets, and the lingering smell of expensive perfume mixed with fear. I touched the fabric of my red dress. It was still pristine. For the first time in a week, the only thing that had been destroyed was the lie. Lucas walked in from the patio. He had taken off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His eyes were red and swollen. "Mum," he said, his voice cracking. I want to clean this up. Please, let me handle the mess." I looked at him. In the past, I would have told him to rest. I would have made him a hot chocolate and told him we would fix it together. "You can clean it," I said, my voice even. "But you do it as a tenant working off a debt. You are not a son helping his mother tonight. You are support staff for the landlord. Do you understand?" He flinched, but he nodded. "I understand." While Lucas swept up the shards of his wife's rage, Andrew, Mark, and I walked the perimeter of the house. We collected every spare key. We reset the alarm codes. I called a 24-hour locksmith who arrived within 20 minutes to change the tumblers on the front and back doors. Every click of a bolt felt like a stitch closing a wound. Andrew paused at the front step as he prepared to leave. The night was quiet now. The crickets of Texas, the only sound left. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. Pulling the curtain back in front of everyone like that, I looked out at the dark street. I thought about the bleach. I thought about the facility they wanted to put me in. I chose silence for 3 years because I thought blood was thicker than water. I thought, if I just took the insults, they would eventually love me. I almost lost my home and my freedom because of that hope. Tonight, I just chose myself. That is all. I went back inside. I turned off the crystal chandeliers, plunging the great hall into shadow. The only light came from the small lamp on the console table. I stood there alone in the silence. I walked to the closet in the hallway and pulled out a simple wire hanger. On it hung the first dress, the blue one with the white bleach stains eating through the silk. I did not throw it away. I carried it to my small private room on the first floor and hung it on the outside of my wardrobe door. It was ugly, but it was the truth. It was my reminder that no one else would ever decide where I lived, what I wore, or who I was. I walked to the front door one last time. I turned the heavy deadbolt. The loud, solid clack echoed through the empty mansion. It was the best sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a woman who had finally locked the door on disrespect and opened a new chapter on her own terms. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this story. I would love to know where you folks are listening from. So drop your city or country in the comments below. I always love reading them. If you enjoyed this wild ride, please smash that like button. Hit subscribe on Grandma's Family Diary. And do not forget to press the hype button to help us get this story out to more people. Stay safe out there.